Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to another pixel art video. In this one, I'm going to be doing a time lapse, and I'm going to be doing a Hollow Knight scene. And Hollow Knight is one of my favorite indie games. It's an amazing game, and so I wanted to do kind of some fan art, pixel art of it. So I start off here with a color palette that's a default palette in Sprite. I don't remember exactly which one this is called, but it's like a 64 color palette. And I start blocking out the characters and the scene just kind of on really rough. I'm using a tablet at this point, and I switched to using a mouse for certain parts during the video, mainly when I'm doing anti-aliasing and stuff like that. But especially early on, I like to use tablets because then I find my work is a lot looser and it tends to give me better results when I do actually get into the details later. So I do like using a tablet. This is just a cheap Wacom tablet, bamboo Wacom tablet. I think it was like maybe $100 brand new. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I bought this one actually. It's not the greatest, but it works. It gets the job done. And so I start off here blocking out the characters and staying really loose with the art. I'm not trying to get to exact pixels yet. It kind of feels more like I'm painting a little bit right now than doing pixel art. And I think that's a good way to start off, is to start off more like you're painting rather than doing pixel art, especially when you're doing a big scene like this. Now I did use a reference for this. I just found a reference image on Google, and I was forced to zoom in quite a bit more because of its pixel art, and I wanted to be able to show the characters much closer. So I zoomed in quite a bit more for this scene than what the reference actually showed. Now I'm starting to add in the outlines to the characters because Hollow Knight has black outlines on all the characters. I kind of wanted to grab that same kind of style from the game. I wanted to try and translate the style. They're obviously using HD art, but I still wanted to do a similar style but in pixel art. You can see we don't have quite enough of those in the UI, but that's okay. We sacrificed that in order to make it look a little bit better. Now we're just making some adjustments and cleaning up the outlines on the character a little bit. I'm going to start cleaning up our cartographer over there here soon as well. I think the cartographer's name is Cornifer, if I remember right. I looked it up yesterday and decided to title the piece Cornifer the Cartographer, but I don't remember exactly if that's his name now. But yeah, we're cleaning up those lines now, trying to get it to look good. Looks a little bit like an elephant right now, but I do make some changes to try and fix that. Focus on the UI here up in the corner. To try and I want to sell this as kind of like a demake, so I want to make the piece look similar to a demake. I was really worried about how I was going to get this to look good because it's such a low resolution, but I was able to use a little bit of anti-aliasing and stuff to get that to look good enough that I could move on from it. Zoomed out, it looks pretty decent. So, need to clean up those lines. I experimented with thicker lines, didn't really like that. Started adding some anti-aliasing here to try and clean it up. I do a lot of anti-aliasing in this piece, and I think at this lower resolution, it can be helpful to do it. I think a better pixel artist than me would have done a little bit less than what I actually end up doing. I think sometimes I tend to overdo anti-aliasing a little bit still. And better pixel artists are better at kind of knowing when they need it and when they can get away with not using it. And I still tend to just kind of use it almost everywhere, it feels like. But I do feel like I'm getting better. I've improved quite a bit. My anti-aliasing has improved a lot over the years, and so you're at the spot that you're at, right? You don't want to don't compare yourself too much with other people. and enjoy the journey. You are where you are, and enjoy that spot of your journey. Try and do the best you can there and just keep learning and growing. And I've got the preview window up. With anti-aliasing, I find it's really helpful to have the preview window up and to watch that, to see. I tend to experiment, and I look for pixels that look really harsh to me and then try and find ways to soften those pixels. Sometimes there's a pixel on an edge that looks super hard, and I think, well, how can I soften that pixel so it looks a little bit softer? And the preview window is extremely helpful for me in that. I try to shrink the nose here. I think it's a proboscis, since I think the character is a bug. But I shrink it down because I don't want the character to look like an elephant. And I think making it smaller helps it to look more like a proboscis. And that word I learned from Magic School Bus, I'm pretty sure, when I was a kid. So cleaning up the UI, adding some anti-aliasing here as well. And this is an area that I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. The UI, I think, looks pretty cool. And just trying to soften those really hard edges. And sometimes you can use a slightly lighter color on really hard pixels to soften them. And it helps to, so even though the outline isn't completely black on the little coin there, for example, it helps to soften the edges and to help it feel a little bit more round and not quite as harsh. So I come into anti-alias our character here, Knight, and this was super quick. I was very surprised at how fast I was able to clean up this character and make it feel good. The character is very simple, and I think that was really intentional since they had to do a lot of different animations for the character. Very smart there by the designers. Okay, so I want to work on the background now because I feel the characters are cleaned up fairly well, but the background still, I wanted to add a lot more detail to kind of capture. Hollow Knight has a lot of cool detail in the backgrounds, so I wanted to capture that as well. So I select the 3 different colors that I had in the background so that I can work on the background like it's its own layer, but it's really not. And I think there are little eggs in the background. I start trying to add those little eggs or whatever they're supposed to be. And I didn't really like at first how they were coming out. I tried to use a brighter color, and I think that's what the reference image does. And it just didn't quite turn out how I was hoping. So I start adding in the fence just to kind of add something else, move on. Sometimes if you don't really like how something is going, it can be helpful to just move on to something else and work there, work in a different area. If one area is not really working, try working in a different area. And I pretty quickly found that the fence was looking pretty cool. I liked the start that I had to the fence, even though it was really rough. And I added my own color here, but then I think I end up taking it out because it just doesn't quite work. So what I do is I end up darkening those in kind of the lighter area, and then just using the lighter color. You'll see, I think I do it here pretty soon. So I add a bit more to the fence there. I'm trying to kind of go paint with a broad stroke here where I kind of cover a lot of different areas. Yep, here's the spot where I make this darker and then just make those lighter. And this kind of ends up looking okay. It's still not exactly what I was going for, but it's good enough that I end up keeping it. So now I start to clean up the fence. The fence is really rough and needs a lot of cleanup. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it is in the background. It's not the focus of the image. I also can't really alias the fence because of the colors, my limited palette here. I'd have to add new colors in order to get some aliasing in those areas, I think. And so I decide not to do that, and I decide that it's okay for the very background not to be aliased, and it will end up kind of being different from the foreground in that way. So you can come up with different ways. I do alias the kind of foreground elements here because these are on the same layer as the characters. Like in game, they're kind of on the same depth as the characters, and so I decided to alias these. And this is once again an area where I think I get a little carried away with the aliasing. A better pixel artist might have done a bit less here. And I think I could go back and do a bit less here as well. But in the end, it looks pretty good still. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It does look a little bit, I would say, fuzzy because of so much aliasing. And so there's kind of a balance, because when you alias something, it softens it and makes it look fuzzier, right? So if you don't alias, then it looks really, really sharp and harsh. And so I think there's a balance between trying to get some aliasing and not doing too much. So I want to clean up this fence a little bit, make it look so it's not symmetrical at all. So I'm like, well, let's try and make it somewhat symmetrical so that these look somewhat similar. I don't actually go through and make them all perfect with each other, which is probably what I would have done if it was a foreground element. But since it's in the background, I'm like, I can get away with it not being exactly perfect. And I think, you know, those who like things to be very orderly, and I think a lot of pixel artists do, it can be hard to make sacrifices like that sometimes. In game development, it's really smart to kind of think about where you can do that, where you can be looser and not quite as worried about getting every single pixel exactly where it needs to be. And the background is a place where you can do that a little bit more. Animation as well. In animation, you can get away with having some frames not being quite as clean as they could be. And since making games takes a lot of time, it's important to think about the places where you can spend your time in the more important areas. And that's what it is. It's about focusing your time on the areas that are important. I spent a lot more time cleaning up the characters in the front. And so here is the final result. I'm really happy with it. I hope you all enjoyed this video and learned something from it. I love doing these pixel art videos, and I've been doing kind of different ones recently, but I've had a lot of fun with that. Hope you have enjoyed them as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like and a thumbs up, and I will talk to you all later.